On Tuesday evening, some of you were here for our apologetics session, which was about the Bible. What is the Bible? How did it come to be written? How should we understand it today? Big questions. Well, it's just a coincidence that in the Gospel reading today, both halves of the passage show us the Bible reflecting on the meaning of the Bible. It's a kind of reflexive meta-narrative, or whatever the literary theorists would say. It's like when the Shakespeare character breaks away from the conversation within the play, steps to the front of the stage and addresses you, the audience, about what is going on in the play. First, St. Luke addresses us directly. He tells us that in his writings he is sharing eyewitness accounts of events that have been carefully handed down from those who were involved in them. His gospel, he is saying, is recent history, memory, and not just mythology. This is what Christians continue to claim today. This is what we were talking about on Tuesday. That the Bible is not just inspiring and helpful, but that it is true. And above all, that it presents the truth about Jesus Christ, his life, his teaching, his death and resurrection. We're not interested in myths and fairy tales. Everything hangs on the belief that God entered our history. And if we can't know the truth about that history, then honestly, it's a waste of time. And why are we here this morning? Now, your friends might be sceptical. Why should you trust the Bible? What if it is just Christian propaganda? What if it's fake news? They're good questions. So let's just do a little bit of apologetics, and let me give you 4 reasons why I think we can and should trust the Bible, and especially why we can trust the accounts of Jesus' life that are presented in Luke's Gospel and the other 3 as well. First, timing. Some people, some of you still probably, have the idea that the Gospels were written hundreds of years after the events they describe. It sounds like a game of Chinese whispers, with stories being passed down a chain over many generations and getting more and more confused. It's simply not true. The 4 Gospels were written just decades after the death of Jesus, not centuries. They're incredibly close to the events. The Gospel of St. Mark was probably written about 35 years after the death of Jesus. It's like me telling you stories about life in the 1980s. Now, I know that seems an eternity to many of you, but believe me, the 80s actually happened, and I was there. When the earliest Christian texts were written, there were hundreds of people still alive, probably thousands, who had lived through these events personally. You couldn't make things up, because these people were still there, hearing the Gospels being read. They could confirm or contradict them. It's not ancient history, but living memory. The second reason we can trust the Gospels is this: consistency. There is a fundamental consistency about the core events that take place and about the life and teaching of Jesus. Of course, each Gospel has a slightly different focus and feel. Imagine 4 different newspapers reporting on the same event, or 4 siblings talking about their parents. You'd hear a few different stories, wouldn't you? But the central story is exactly the same. And the Gospels are consistent not just with each other, maybe you'd expect that, but with everything else we have from that period, with the Christian letters that circulated, with the evidence we have from non-Christian writings, with the local geography and coinage and art and inscriptions. The incredible discoveries that have been made in archaeology over the last 200 years have only confirmed the events of the Gospels. If you go to the Holy Land, you can actually see today many of the things that are described in the Gospels. Everything fits together. And everything reinforces the idea that the Gospels, as St. Luke says, are reliable and trustworthy historical documents. The third reason we can trust the Gospels is because we can trust the people who wrote them, and the communities that passed them on, and the church that treasured them and still treasures them. These first Christians had their lives turned upside down through their encounter with Jesus, by his life and teaching in Galilee, his death and resurrection in Jerusalem. They were desperate to tell people what had happened. They were willing to die for it. They were simply not interested in making up stories. This is again what St. Luke says in the Gospel today. I am giving you trustworthy eyewitness accounts of what has happened. Elsewhere, St. John says, I am testifying to you what I know to be true. We are seeing things through the eyes of Christian believers, of course, but their passion to share the truth, a truth that has changed their lives, make us believe it even more and not less. We trust the Bible partly because we trust the church. The Bible is the book of the church. This is the community that wrote the Gospels and the other writings of the New Testament, that collected together the books of the Bible, that defended it and passed it down through history, that proclaims its message today. You can't have the Bible, in fact, without having the church. And the final reason we can trust the Gospels, I'm sure there are others as well, is their credibility. Their credibility. You know when you talk to someone and you just have an intuition that you can trust them. Many people have felt that way about the Gospels, even when they had no faith. If you read the Gospels, they just feel genuine, credible. There is an authenticity, a sense that they are trustworthy, that they are speaking to your heart, that this message is meant to be taken seriously. It feels as if there is a bigger truth behind the individual words on each page. So, there are good reasons to trust the Bible and to trust the core historical truth of the Gospels. But in the end, it is only the experience of reading them and actually hearing them that this truth will convince you. And this is what happens in the second half of the Gospel, when we are in Nazareth in the synagogue with Jesus. Jesus takes a scroll from the Bible, from the prophet Isaiah. He unrolls it, reads from it, and says that this text is being fulfilled right now in its hearing. The people are transfixed. The true meaning of the Bible is discovered only in the person of Jesus Christ and in our encounter with him. This is why it's sometimes said, you might have heard this lovely phrase, that Christianity is a religion of the Word rather than a religion of the book. We read this book, but we hear the Word, the voice of Christ. He speaks to us very personally and sometimes very powerfully. And if only this could be part of our lives. When I was 15, I had no Christian faith and no interest in God. But one morning we had a school assembly, and there was a biblical reading from St. John's Gospel. It went, you know this, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us, full of grace and truth." I didn't understand what it meant at the time, but something spoke to me. There was a kind of echo in my heart, as if there was something important here that needed exploring. 2 years later, I was reading the same Gospel in my bedroom. I had become interested in Christianity by this time, but it hadn't touched me in a very personal way. And I read these words of Jesus when he says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust in me." And it felt as though Jesus himself was present with me, speaking to me, heart to heart. I couldn't see him, but his words through the Bible felt very personal. It was like hearing a voice rather than reading a text. Years later, when I was training to be a priest, I think I've told you this story before, I went away on a retreat. It was a difficult time for me. I was very unsure about whether to continue my training. I felt very inadequate and full of doubts. And I remember sitting on the garden wall with the Bible and reading the words of John the Baptist as he spoke about Jesus and said, "He must grow greater, I must grow less. He must grow greater, I must grow less." And it was like a light going on, a very clear answer to prayer. I was trying to do everything myself, and now Jesus was turning it upside down and saying, "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to trust in me and let me work in you." Every Christian will have a different story about how God has spoken to them through the words of the Bible. I don't think I'm special. I'm just using these moments as examples. Sometimes it's something completely unexpected, opening a door we didn't know was there. Sometimes it's a simple note of reassurance or encouragement. Sometimes it's a very concrete message or a command. Do this or don't do that. And sometimes it's just the day-to-day reading and praying without any big experiences. Jesus said, "If you listen to my words and put them into practice, it's like building a house on rock. The foundation is so secure that your faith will never be undermined." We just have to spend some time with the Bible and to follow his teaching and example. It might be reading the Bible alone, or joining a prayer group, or finding a prayer guide, or joining a study group, or hearing the Bible readings at church on Sunday, as we do each weekend. If you are not sure how to start, here is a simple suggestion. Find a Bible and just enjoy reading through one of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke or John, which tell the story of Jesus. Go at whatever pace suits you. There is no pressure. See what you find interesting. If there is a passage, a line, a word that strikes you, then stay with it and mull over it, like when you pull off a motorway in order to admire the view. You're not just reading the words on the page, you're listening to what God is saying to you in your heart. This kind of personal reading, sometimes called Lectio Divina, is often the first place we start. But we soon realise that if we want to understand the true message of the Bible and to unlock its deepest mysteries, we need the help of others, and we need the help of the church. The Holy Spirit is speaking to the whole church and not just to me. I need the wisdom of the church to help me appreciate the deepest wisdom of the Bible. I'm so pleased that we are starting our week of guided prayer today. It's not just for those who have signed up to work with a prayer guide. It's a chance for every one of us, each one of us, to spend a little bit more time in prayer, and perhaps to spend a little bit more time with the Bible, and to deepen our love for the word of the Lord. Let me finish with a story about St. Augustine. He was in a great personal crisis when he was in his early 30s. He felt completely lost. He was sitting in a garden and heard the voice of a child chanting, "Take it and read, take it and read." He felt that he was meant to pick up this Bible that he had seen earlier. He opened the Bible and read these words: "You must leave aside conflict and jealousy and clothe yourself in Jesus Christ." Clothe yourself in Jesus Christ. He experienced a profound peace, and his soul was flooded with a light that took away all darkness and doubt. It won't be exactly the same for everyone, and it may not happen every time we open the Bible. But there is an invitation to all of us to see what God wants to do for us through the power of the words of the Bible.